Kenny, obviously we knew it was going to be a challenging week last week against Whitman and Linfield, who are kind of separating themselves at the top of the Northwest Conference along with Puget Sound. Uh, Despite two losses, obviously there were still some clear signs of improvement last week, and talk about those and how we build on that.
Yeah, I mean, going back to last Tuesday against Whitman, I think it was a really strong performance for probably, nearly 3 quarters, I'd say. Obviously, we kind of had a flat second a little bit after a really good recovery. I think in that first quarter being down 10-2 and finishing the quarter 13-10, and then kind of have a little bit of a slump there in the second quarter, kind of a back and forth game there for most of the third. And the first half of the fourth, I felt like the score was kind of tied at 38-37 felt like an eternity there. Get the lead at 36-35, and then they quickly score it after that, and then we're just not able to kind of respond and, find a solution against their zone that kind of stifled us a little bit. But defensively, just really proud of the performance there. Obviously, making a few more baskets solves a lot of issues there, but just things you want to build on. I don't think it was as far part of a margin as it finished in that kind of last 145 when they had some late baskets in transition when we were kind of desperate a little bit. And then, going to Friday's ball game, just kind of, got onslaughted a little bit there where, wanted to have the goal of building off of that first quarter down at their place. And then just, they just really kind of outwilled us, unfortunately, with, killing us in transition some as the game waned on. And early on, just kind of getting us on the offensive glass was kind of the separator early. And then when you just kind of turn it over and just kind of lose those little discipline will plays, it's going to be really tough to overcome. And then, obviously we were, off over the Saturday, Sunday portion of the weekend. You see kind of how, results go around conferences. Really, any given game, matchup, or day is up for grabs when, Whitman loses down at Linfield and then, really kind of leads it, felt like wire to wire for the most part down in Walla Walla on Saturday, and they end up winning in overtime. So it's kind of funny when you feel like you're really even with the team on Tuesday, and then you kind of get overmatched on Friday, but then you see those two teams play. It's just kind of funny how it really shows that every game is a different being of its own, and even though a result on a given day might not feel super within grasp, like you said, going forward, how do you build on that? Is that you can't take any possession off, because if you do show up and just play a full 40, you can play with anybody.
Typically during this week of the year, we're talking about seniors and recognition and that kind of thing. No seniors this year. Does the team have a sense of we're just getting started?
I think there's always kind of a sweet spot. Even going into the year, that was something that we talked about early on in some team leadership meetings of we're kind of in a weird spot, but also a sweet spot of you have a group that's gaining experience with every given day, week, and game, but it's also something where they have the urgency because they are playing to want to right the ship and fix some of the shortcomings that we faced, but also they have the excitement and youthful energy of time that hey, we still have time. And as a player, that's always something really nice where you're kind of having that nice balance of you're not panicked that you're running out of time, but you also feel the the urgency and reality of the moment that hey, we want to start turning the corner here, so it's kind of a sweet spot of that. And going into this week for myself, just thinking of the group of this is something where going forward in the future you want to be fighting for a playoff spot, home court advantage, hosting the conference tournament. So that's something where you have four games, guaranteed 4 games left, 2 of them at home. It's a great stretch where you're playing a team that you beat the first time around and one that you had some success on in the first half, and then kind of let it get away from you in the second half. So it's those things that you want to build off of, not only for the repetition going forward, but also kind of to, just feel more comfortable and confident going forward as well in the future.
Well, talk about George Fox and Lewis and Clark, two teams that both have a little bit of momentum coming into this weekend. What are they doing that's going to present a challenge maybe that is different from what we saw the first time?
Yeah, George Fox, I mean, their system is their system. They're in their kind of, I think, the tail end of their second full year kind of invested in doing what they've been doing on the offensive and defensive end, which has really, produced some good results for them. They've had a little bit of injury trouble. That's every team deals with. Lewis and Clark in that same boat a little bit. Those two teams played this past Saturday afternoon, so a little bit of half duty where you're able to just kind of watch the game all together and kind of take some notes on both teams. Always different, like you mentioned, second time around, especially when you flip the order of how you play the teams and who you play when. So being able to, fully focused on Lewis and Clark, for the first few days of the week before changing our attention to Fox. Same thing goes for them, where they had that really good win against Whitman. LC did down at their place, and then quickly turning the page. Their focus was fully on us. I would think these next few days going into the games this weekend. So you really just have to be yourself. At this time of the year, there's not going to be wholesale changes by anybody. Obviously, they had a little bit of injury, bad luck as well. So you just have to respond to teams that are at this time just playing hard. You just got to play hard and enjoy the home games that you have. Obviously, you said we don't have seniors, but anytime you're finishing up your regular season at home, you want to go off on a positive note.